The objective this offseason for the Washington Commanders on the offensive line has to be clear. Fill in for Sam Cosmi while he recovers from his injury, while improving the offensive line and not breaking the bank. That coming up on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome inside, everybody, to today's episode of Locked On Commanders. I am your host, David Harrison, here with you every Monday through Friday, your friend on the ground covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. Also helping out with WUSA9.com's local coverage of the team. And I want to thank you for coming through for today's episode. On this episode, we are talking about the offensive line, continuing our off-season preview series. We're talking about free agents, we're talking about trade targets, and we're talking about, this time, the offensive line. Wide receiver group, edge group, already done. If you missed those episodes, go back in the timeline to find them after you finish this episode. For those of you who are not already, please subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode. And of course, got to give a special thank you to our everydayers who come through every single day. If you're new to the show, I want to thank you for giving it a try. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders 5 days a week, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So be sure to come back soon and often. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers, you can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Looking at the Washington Commanders offensive line as we head into the 2025 offseason. Of course, scouting combine coming up next week. We'll have plenty of draft conversations because of that next week. But this week, we're going to round out some free agency trade preview stuff, looking at the OLine group specifically. When you look at the 2025 Washington Commanders offensive line as it stands today, I'm going to project one of your starters. But your starting left tackle, Brandon Coleman, same as last year. Starting left guard, Nick Allegretti, same as last year. Starting center, Tyler Biadasz, same as last year. Starting right tackle, Andrew Wiley, same as last year. Starting right guard to start 2025. Right now, I would probably pencil in Chris Paul to be your starting right guard. And I know some Commanders fans just flinch. Chris Paul has been with this team for a while now. So the theory is going to be, or the predominant opinion is going to be, if he was worth a starting position, he probably would have shown that ability now and have one already. But with Sam Cosmi injured, he is the person on the roster right now that probably looks like he would step up into that position. Now, of course, we have a whole offseason to go, and that's what this conversation is about, right? So the starting unit, including Sam Cosmi on the starting five, finished top 10 last year in pass blocking efficiency, according to Pro Football Focus's measurements, including the postseason. Now, they had the second most pass attempts that they defended, 22nd in sacks. That's a good thing. That's 22nd fewest sacks given up, 24th in quarterback hits, third most hurries, however, ninth most pressures, however, 20 games, not 17. So there's a little bit of displacement there that has to be taken into account. But the bottom line is third most hurries, ninth most pressures. It has been said that the Washington Commanders offensive line benefited from the abilities of one Jayden Daniels a little bit more than maybe people are giving credit for. Those numbers kind of illustrate that, right? They kind of illuminate that a little bit. So when you look at the backups, when you look at the depth of the Washington Commanders offensive line under contract for 2025 right now, at tackle, you got Aneem Dankwa. Guards, you've got Sam Cosmi, again, injured. So right now we're going to put him in that group, even though obviously when he's healthy, he is a starter. Bobby Hart, Julian Good-Jones. No additional centers on the roster. A total of 9 offensive linemen currently on the 2025 roster, plus one injured, Sam Cosmi. They entered camp last year with 15. So you figure they're going to at least add 5 more at some point during the offseason, if not more. And so some of those additions could come from their own free agent pool. Right now, when you're looking at the free agent pool, there are tackles, Cornelius Lucas and Trent Scott. Guards, there are no specific guards, even though Trent Scott obviously played guard and filled in for Sam Cosmi. And center Michael Dieter is also a free agent. For me, I think you can certainly make a case to bring back Cornelius Lucas. You can certainly make a case to bring back Trent Scott. I think one of the most impressive things last season about this offensive line group was the way that Cornelius Lucas handled coming into training camp, coming into the offseason program, really kind of rotating, not really understanding where his job was going to be, what his specific role was going to be on the team, and kind of going back and forth with this rookie Brandon Coleman, who played guard, played tackle at TCU. A lot of people projected him as a guard in the NFL. The Commanders clearly projected him as a tackle, and it was kind of a who's going to start, who's going to get this rep, and then you go into games and Cornelius Lucas gets a series, Brandon Coleman gets a series here and there, and it's a lot of kind of back and forth. And for a lot of veterans, you're looking at it, you're like, the time that I put into this league, the time that I put into this team, and this kid walking in here, there's a potential that a lot of veterans could feel a certain kind of way about it. But of course, this team also set the tone very early with Adam Peters and Dan Quinn that kind of attitude was not going to be dealt with. So Cornelius Lucas did have that feeling, certainly had to keep it behind closed doors, keep it in his house, keep it, under the vest, because had he let that feeling out, probably would have gone the way of guys like Jahan Dotson, Fedarian Mathis, KJ Henry. Not that those guys were departed because of those attitudes, just saying probably would have been one of the ones to be sent packing as well. But Cornelius Lucas, never really gave on, never really seemed like there was a moment where he was frustrated by the situation. And you love having a swing tackle like that. You love having a backup, a depth player, an offensive line player who, one, knows the game, very smart, good locker room guy, willing to do whatever he needs to do in order to help the team win, like a guy like Trent Scott. You know what I mean? Again, not a guy that anybody's going to really be climbing over to say this dude needs to start every game, all this other stuff. Again, I think he did a pretty applaudable job. I don't even know if that's a word, but he did a good job filling in for Sam Cosmi after Sam got hurt. But again, nobody's going to be looking at him as a full-time starter, long-term starter for your offensive line, but a dude who can come in and get things done. And of course, first guy to ever catch a touchdown pass from Jayden Daniels. So why wouldn't you want him back on the roster? Now, if you do that, you've got 11 offensive linemen plus Sam Cosmi, who's again injured. So it gives you 11 or 12, however you want to look at it if you're the Washington Commanders. Me personally, I would probably look at it as 11. I'm expecting Sam Cosmi to probably start the season on the PUP list and all those things, or IR, or whatever it is. So you're looking at 11 is basically what I would do. So you're looking at adding about 4, probably get a couple in the draft, you know what I mean, or via undrafted free agents. So you're probably looking at signing 1 or 2 free agents or trying to make a trade. Not a lot of trade conversations for offensive linemen out there. There's typically not a lot of trade conversations for top shelf offensive linemen because top shelf offensive linemen are kind of hard to come by. So if you have them, you don't usually want to trade them. It's not usually how things go in the National Football League. But that is the table that we've got set when we look at the Washington Commanders 2025 offensive line. Now let's get to additions we can make, looking at the top tackle options in this year's free agent class projected by Pro Football Focus. Coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you in part by FanDuel. When the games tip off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you want to bet on the fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay easily. My favorite thing about FanDuel same-game parlays. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether I'm backing my favorite team or looking for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch 3. I never feel like I'm missing any of the action. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you can get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers, you can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Continuing our offseason free agency NFL trade primer preview of the Washington Commanders offensive line, we set the table looking at the projected starting 5 offensive linemen given who is currently on the 2025 roster, and of course accounting for Sam Cosmi's injury that he suffered in the divisional round of the playoffs against the Detroit Lions. It's going to cost him, we expected, at least a little bit at the beginning of the regular season. I said on a previous episode, I'm setting the timetable to return internally to Thanksgiving because I feel like that's a pretty good distance away. And if he comes back beforehand, which I think is certainly possible, I'm going to feel good about it versus being like, well, maybe fingers crossed he comes back to be in the season and then every week he's not there. I'm just getting more and more nervous and stressed out about it. So that's just the way I'm going to go about it. Where can the team upgrade? All right. So the offensive line, again, if you go back to the beginning of training camp, everybody was worried about the offensive line. But I think it ends up being serviceable. Again, Jayden Daniels certainly helps out what he's been able to do in the decision-making and the athleticism and all that stuff. But even I want to say the best offensive line. I don't think the Philadelphia Eagles go into most off seasons thinking, how can we get better up front? But the Washington Commanders certainly have that. And you look at the left tackle position, not so much replacing Brandon Coleman as in benching him, but potentially moving him and getting a better person in there. Left guard, Nick Allegretti. I like Nick Allegretti a lot. I think he's got that second level ability. He's got that aggressive nature that you really want. But I wouldn't, necessarily put him in the conversation right now of best left guard in the NFL. So if that's the case, then you're always going to kind of have that opening. Right tackle, Andrew Wiley. I'm a big fan of Andrew Wiley, a little bit older, coming into his final year of his contract. And there's a possibility he needs to slide over to allow to fill in for Sam Cosmi. We'll get into that here in just a little bit. And then, of course, you do need a right guard to start the season, right? And that's where, again, Andrew Wiley could come in. Tyler Biotish, I think he's probably the one guy that I think most people are kind of happy with and saying, just leave him there. Again, not necessarily he's the best center in the National Football League, but that relationship between he and Jayden Daniels really seem to go well. They really seem to work well together. So it's kind of a don't mess with or don't fix what ain't broke, right? So the trick here, when I look at the Washington Commanders offensive line as it stands today, and obviously any move that gets made or every move that gets made as the offseason progresses changes things just a little bit, right? But in the context of this right now, I think the trick here is kind of trying to get a clear upgrade in one spot while opening up a window for someone to fill in for Sam Cosmi. If you can make those two things happen with one move, I think that is golden. Now, to me, the best way to do that is to sign either an upgrade at left or right tackle and slide Andrew Wiley inside. Andrew Wiley has guard experience. He's got guard roots. So there's a reason to expect that he could be able to fill that role for Sam Cosmi while he's away. And then when Sam Cosmi comes back, you either make the decision to slide Andrew Wiley back over to right tackle as a starter, or you keep your starter at right tackle and you make Andrew Wiley your swing tackle, and you now have a really well-experienced, really good, talented offensive lineman to make an additional eligible receiver to give you your six-man lines and all those things when you need them. So in that spirit, let's look at the top left tackle, top right tackle options on the free agent board. This isn't necessarily my pick for who is the best for the Commanders specifically, but the best tackle free agents on the board according to PFF, and two guys that I've seen many Commanders fans talk about. First and foremost, left tackle Ronnie Stanley, currently of the Baltimore Ravens. His contract is expiring, and there's some talk that the Ravens need to bring him back, but there's also a lot of talk that the Ravens basically are expected to let him walk. Ronnie Stanley turns 31 in March, first-round pick by the Ravens back in 2016. He's a two-time Pro Bowler, played every game for Baltimore in 2024, but played just 18 games over 3 years from 2020 to 2022 due to injuries, played 13 games in 2023. So he's kind of 2 years removed from that injury streak that really took a lot of games away from him. Played 13 in 2023, played all the games for Baltimore just this last season. So that's promising. His pass blocking grade on PFF was good. Run blocking grade, not as good. In fact, it was actually the second worst of his career. And he also had 15 penalties called against him, which I think is a career high. And it could be a sign of things kind of slowing down for him physically. Even if they're false starts, looking to get a head start, to get out as quickly as possible. Holds are typically a sign that obviously you've been beaten and you're just trying to hold on for dear life type of thing. So that could be a little bit not confusing, but convoluting to the situation. Obviously, something that Bobby Johnson, the scouts, and those guys would need to look at to decide whether or not Ronnie Stanley is a true target. Here's kind of where the rub comes in. Market value, according to Spot Track, $20.7 million per year over a 2-year deal. So you're looking at about $41.4 million total in 2 years. Don't know how much that would be guaranteed, incentives, bonuses, all that stuff. But essentially, that's what you're looking at. Pretty high price tag. For me, if the Commanders were to sign Ronnie Stanley, would likely signal a move to right tackle for Brandon Coleman. I don't think you're bringing Ronnie Stanley in and asking him to move to right tackle. I think you do that. You're asking Brandon Coleman to move to right tackle, and you're asking Andrew Wiley to move in to right guard. Now, I know there's some Commanders fans and some insiders have come to me and kind of said, hey, why don't we talk about Brandon Coleman moving into guard and Andrew Wiley staying at right tackle, or finding a new right tackle, moving Brandon Coleman to right guard and finding a new left tackle. And I will tell you this. Obviously, again, Brandon Coleman has experience at guard. There was a lot of projection about him playing guard coming into the NFL from the college scouting community and draft, media community, all that stuff. So it's not like the idea has no merit. But what I believe is that the Commanders, Bobby Johnson, Dan Quinn, whoever, Cliff Kingsbury, really like Coleman as a tackle. I think they really enjoy him as a tackle. I think that's where they see his future. So if the choice is Coleman or Wiley moves inside, I think the choice is going to be Wiley moving inside. That's the best I can give you. However, bottom line is you bring Ronnie Stanley in. He's the left tackle. Someone's a right tackle. Someone's moving in to right guard. But, again, are you going to move Brandon Coleman straight to the bench when Sam Cosmi is healthy? No, you're probably going to move him to right tackle, right? So it just makes sense. If you're going to do that, make him the right tackle from Jump Street, move Wiley to right guard. When Sam comes back, Wiley is your swing tackle / bonus lineman. Top right tackle on the board, according to PFF, familiar name for Washington fans who have been fans of Washington for a while, Morgan Moses, New York Jets most recently. Offensive lineman, turns 34 in March, so definitely an elder statesman. Third-round pick by Washington back in 2014, was released by Ron Rivera after Washington signed Charles Leno and drafted Sam Cosmi, who was drafted as a tackle out of Texas at the time. Started 61 games in 4 seasons since he left Washington. That's a lot of games. Good pass blocking grades in 2024, about the same run blocking grades as Ronnie Stanley. Only called for 8 penalties. The market value, much better here in this situation. $2 million per year on a 1-year deal. That is, of course, projected again by Spot Track. If you sign Morgan Moses, he is a right tackle. So that, to me, signals that you're either moving Morgan Moses inside or you're moving Andrew Wiley inside. And Brandon Coleman is staying at left tackle. To me, I think Wiley is probably moving inside. You know what I mean? But just for the sake of clarity, obviously the team could choose to move either of them inside, but I think it would be Wiley. Coleman would be staying at left tackle in that situation. And then again, Wiley would move inside. And then, look, Sam Cosmi comes back. Morgan is struggling. Maybe Wiley goes back out to right tackle and Morgan becomes that bonus lineman. If Moses is doing well, Wiley again becomes your swing tackle, becomes your bonus lineman. Of course, those guys aren't the only options. They're just the top ones on the PFF board. I've got a couple others that I want to give you, and an interior offensive lineman that is going to follow a trend, but I don't know that many of you are talking about. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, wrapping up the week here at Locked On Commanders. Appreciate you coming through this week, today, everydayers. Appreciate you coming through every single day. 2 more options at tackle that I want to run by you. And honestly, 2 more options at tackle that I kind of vibe better with, if I'm just being completely upfront. No disrespect to Ronnie Stanley, no disrespect to Morgan Moses, but I just think this team is not necessarily looking for the 1-year rental on the offensive line. Like, the offensive line is different. The offensive line is 5 dudes acting as one. It's one thing to get a 1-year rental on the edge, even a 1-year rental at linebacker. Zach Ertz on a 1-year deal coming back, stuff like that. If that were to happen, those things are certainly acceptable. And then on the offensive line, though, especially with a young quarterback, you want to try to get a starting 5 as solidified as you can and keep that starting 5 as consistent as you can for your quarterback. So with that in mind, looking at 2 different guys. Offensive tackle Alaric Jackson. Los Angeles Rams. Turns 27 in July, so still fairly young. Former undrafted free agent. You got to love those grinders, those guys who go out there and get everything they've ever had in the NFL. Played all 4 seasons so far with the Rams at tackle and guard. 35 total starts in the last 3 years, including 29 in the last 2 alone. 2024 was his best pass blocking grade year by PFF and his second best run blocking grade year by PFF. Market value, $16 million per year on a 3-year deal. That's not too terrible. He's tackle guard versatile, like we just mentioned, giving offensive line coach Bobby Johnson the opportunity to kind of bring him in, see what he's got, see where he best fits, and really just put the best 5 guys on the field. If he's your best left tackle, then again, move Brandon Coleman to right tackle. Move Andrew Wiley inside. If Alaric Jackson is your best right tackle and Brandon Coleman is your best left tackle, do that. Move Andrew Wiley inside. If Alaric Jackson is your best right guard, but you see right tackle potential in him, play him at guard until Cosmi returns, and then put him at right tackle and put Andrew Wiley back in that swing tackle position. Or, you got a couple years with him, keep Andrew Wiley out there and do the whole Brandon Coleman corner. You have a lot of options is the point that I'm talking to. Now, obviously, Alaric Jackson, I think, is going to want to go from being a starter to being a starter. So I don't know how much he's going to appreciate the whole right tackle song and dance with Andrew Wiley. So I think you're going to kind of get over that hump a little bit earlier. But, at the end of the day, Alaric Jackson, I think, is an attractive option, as is offensive tackle Dan Moore, who currently is with the Pittsburgh Steelers, turns 27 in September, 4th-round pick by the Steelers in 2021. Here's something that's really impressive. All 4 seasons with Pittsburgh, he started no fewer than 16 games. All four. This dude came in as a 4th-round pick and has started no fewer than 16 games for Pittsburgh every single season since then. Now, he has struggled with his consistency over the years. His worst year graded was in 2023 as a pass blocker, but he did have a solid bounce-back season 2024. Run blocking, not great, but also not terrible during his career. His market value, $12.6 million per year on a 3-year deal. He's the kind of guy that you can look much more as like a competitor coming into training camp, doing all those things. But again, another player to give Bobby Johnson, the Commanders O-line coach, an opportunity to work with, find his best fit, find his best location, open the door to competition. So those are 2 other tackle options that, again, just the youth of it, the money part of it. I just feel like probably fits better the motif, I guess. I don't know, the way that Adam Peters seems to work. Interior offensive line. Here is an interior offensive line option idea. Jedrick Wills, Cleveland Browns tackle. Turns 26 in May. First-round pick of the Cleveland Browns back in 2020. Has started 57 of the 58 games that he's played in. He's played in just 8 games, or played in just 8 games in 2023, played in 5 games in 2024, partially due to injuries, but also partially due to getting benched. He decided to sit out the Browns' win over the Ravens during last season, citing an injury that he suffered the week before against the Bengals. After the Browns beat the Ravens, basically Kevin Stefanski, head coach of Cleveland Browns, decided to bench Jedrick Wills for making that business decision. Now, the good thing is that in Washington, the players don't have to make those decisions on their own. Dan Quinn has been very upfront about wanting his guys to be 100% them before they get back on the field. So I feel like if Jedrick Wills were to tell Dan Quinn, I don't feel like I can be 100% me for you this weekend to Ravens, Dan Quinn is going to be the one that says, okay, well, let's shut it down then. Eventually, Wills was put on IR, citing the same knee injury lingering that he suffered in 2023, had multiple surgeries on. So again, health has a big part to do with this, right? But his market value right now is $2.2 million per year on a 1-year deal. Again, a 1-year prove-it deal, first-round pick, first-round talent guy. I don't know what Adam Peters' opinion of him was coming out of the NFL draft that year, but if it was good, then it could be right up Adam Peters' alley. 1-year prove-it deal for a guy who could be tested at right tackle or right guard by Bobby Johnson, along with Andrew Wiley, and then make the best decision you can based on those results. If he fits as a right guard for that 1 year, then you use him to fill in for Sam Cosmi. It enables you to take your time bringing Cosmi back. You're not feeling rushed into it. If he fits at right tackle, again, he's a younger version. He's a younger guy, so you can work with him, potentially make him your long-term guy. Best case scenario, I think, is that he has a Mekhi Becton-like resurgence, right? Mekhi Becton, tackle, first-round pick by the New York Jets, didn't work out, goes to the Eagles, moves inside to guard, has a much better season, resurgent season. Now, for the Commanders, right, it either leads to Wills being your long-term right tackle resurgent, right, type of season, maybe competing for left guard in 2026 with Nick Allegretti, depending on how it goes, or he's a free agent right guard like Mekhi Becton is expected to be, which I think Mekhi Becton is probably the name that a lot of you expect me to bring up for interior linemen here. But perhaps Jedrick Wills becomes a free agent in 2026 as an interior offensive lineman, gets signed away, and you get a compensatory 3rd-round pick or something like that in 2027, depending on how good he does and how much he gets paid. So just an idea out there. Again, Mekhi Becton certainly is an option if he does hit the open market for the Washington Commanders, but I feel like Mekhi Becton a little bit more of a reason to expect to be a starter, whereas Jedrick Wills is going to be coming into his deal looking to prove himself the way that Mekhi Becton was this last year. So that's an idea for the Commanders to consider at interior offensive line. And that is our offensive line pre-free agency NFL trade window, I should say. Look at the offensive line. Next week, we will be in Indianapolis. I'll be driving out to Indianapolis on Monday, and we'll be out there for a couple days. We're not going to be out there for the entire scouting combine. I'm going to be there for Adam Peters, for Dan Quinn, for Lance Newmark, meeting with us in the media. And then I'll be coming home after that. I'll be watching the drills from home, just like a lot of you will be. But we'll do a lot of draft talk. Looking forward to catching up with some people. Maybe a Trevor Sikkema. I always love talking to Trevor Sikkema. Hopefully you guys enjoy hearing him on the show. And we'll look to catch up with as many people as we can out there in Indianapolis. But either way, we'll be back next Monday before I go to Indy with a new mock draft Monday. So make sure you come back for that. If you got questions or comments in the meantime, you can text them to me. You can do that by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. Become an insider today. For your next listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. Tyler Rowland is kicking you off in the morning with some NFL espresso. Tony Wiggins is going to bring you back in the afternoon for some real NFL talk. It's the all new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. As always, thank you so much for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day, everydayers. Thanks for coming through on a consistent basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.